So if the panelists would like to come up here. And we know that you've had a long morning, so we're excited to have some discussion here and some space. While everyone's settling down, one question for the panel as we're kind of getting set up is a lot of this, there's a great phrase when you're working on new projects and called the dark night of the innovator, which is the moment where you feel like all is lost and there is no hope. And some of you have had that, and others, I mean, Laura especially has talked about that. But how did you, a little bit, if you've experienced that, maybe some suggestions of when that happens, how do you break through on that?
I would be surprised if there were just one dark night. It sort of feels like every 6 months we reach this point of, are we moving forward? In what direction? Is it still worth it? Pretty much every 6 months I decide no. And inevitably, a comment comes in on one of our sites from someone in the community saying that they have recently lost a family member, that a family member has recently been arrested, that they're a teacher and this is one of their students, either as a victim or a suspect, and that they appreciate what we do and that they want to help us. What do we need? That's all I need. Yeah. Every 6 months.
Yeah, that's great. And Jake, as a for-profit, have you had that moment where PolicyMic, you've had a great track record. Was there ever a moment where you were trying to figure out how to pivot?
Yeah, I think with these kind of projects, it's obviously so much work. Surrounding yourselves with great mentors, advisors, people like you has been fantastic. But I think the biggest thing for us is, we're trying to be a news site for young people, for a generation that hasn't been served by the mainstream media, and having a core sort of driving principle and a driving belief in what we're doing, lets you push through. Whether it's month 1 or year 2 or whatever it may be. As I talked about in the presentation, young people are stereotyped and caricatured and left out of the mainstream conversation, and serving that audience and doing something different has been sort of the driving thing that no matter how stressful it gets, you still feel excited every day.
Yeah. And Joy, you're 6 or 7 months old at this point?
Yeah, 7 months old.
So have you had enough time to have that moment, or was there, even in the very beginning, were you worried about getting to this point?
Oh yeah, it was definitely in the beginning when we were just looking for funding right before the company was started. The 99% of our investors we talked to, or the angels we talked to, their number one pushback is, "Are you sure this is not a supply and demand issue, where this hasn't appeared simply because this is what the audience wants?" It's classic one of those chicken and egg questions where everyone is complaining about the media, but it's there because that's exactly what the audience wants. So at the end, we just couldn't persuade them. So we thought, we just put in our own money and see what happens first. Right. So we put in our own money. After 6 months, hopefully we proved that there is some sort of a demand there. And I think the number one comforting fact is now we get maybe once every 3 days, we get an email saying from college kids or graduate kids saying, "We love what you guys are doing. Can we intern for free? Can we come work for you for free?" And I think that keeps it going.
I think the great thing about a lot of these organizations is that they are either small enough or nimble enough or brave enough to pivot really fast when things appear that they're not working. And that's been, I think, really valuable to us. And I think a challenge that some sort of larger establishment media has had is we really have the luxury of being small enough and nimble enough to try and fail and try again.
And when you still have your car, so at least there's
right.
As in the darkest night.
And I think there are some nights that it's 9 o'clock at night and the reporter sends me the story and I read it and I go like, oh, this cannot run. It's not we haven't verified enough the information, whatever. So there's always the temptation to say, okay, let's forget about it and wake up tomorrow and see what we do. But our rule is that we publish 5 stories every day, no matter what. So 9 o'clock, we have to sit down and finish the reporting and do the story. So I think having that discipline has been key for success.
That's great.
Can I add? One thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is how our definition of success has changed over the 5 years. And for you, it's keeping your car, and maybe it's page views, and maybe it's revenue. It's interesting to watch how that changes, and I think it's really important to know every time you reach one of those dark nights, what your measure of success is at that moment. And are you meeting it? And if yes, then go forward. And if no, then how do you need to pivot?
That's great. Well, let's open it up for the audience. I'm sure there's plenty of questions. So if you'll just identify yourself on the question, that'd be great.
Hey, hi. Thank you for those great speeches you gave. I'm Joe Wise from Paris. I run a news website that is a startup that is called streetpress.com. Maybe you have clues for us leading startups, new startups. To what extent you deal every day with unique visitors, money, your banker, the team you have to manage, and you have the editorial work dealing with stories, rewriting articles, as you said. What's your key solution to deal with all the management stuff and at the end of the day, rewrite a story, write your article, make your interview? Thanks.
Well, I mean, that's a tough one. I think big companies and corporations continue to struggle with leadership and management and how to structure organizations. I would say in the case of PolicyMic, I mean, I've been really, really fortunate to work with a lifelong friend, Chris Alchek, who comes from the business world and the business side of things, and I come from the editorial world and journalism side of things. So we have a nice mix where we can divide. And so if there's a lesson there, it's don't go at it alone. It's great to have a co-founder, and sort of you need to identify really early on a leadership team and people that you can empower and trust. I would say, it's a challenge for us. I mean, as we try to grow as an organization and hire people, it's all about sort of, making sure that you're building an organization and teaching people how to sort of learn and know what you know, if that makes sense, so that you can step out and be at conferences like this and not worry about the site collapsing. And so I think, definitely it's hiring a good team and then training that team to really, really be smart. And that's one thing that took me 6 months to learn is just because it's in my head doesn't mean it's actually valuable for the company.
I would just add, we were talking about this actually ahead of this panel where, I feel like I'm a journalist, I'm the editor of this organization, and I feel like I've spent the last few years thinking about revenue, and there's so many revenue summits and revenue panels and so many conversations about it. We are finally, I feel like, at the point where I can push back and say, I don't have time to think about revenue anymore. I have to think about journalism. I think part of the luxury of having an organization that gets to a particular size, we've sort of crossed over to the point where now I think virtually almost a third or maybe closer to 50% of our employees now are business side on the operation. And so I feel a little bit like I can sit back, turn and pivot to the journalism now and say, we have this robust team here in place to focus on the business side of our operation. You need those people if you're going to succeed, I think.
Next question.
Hi. Hello. Here. I would like to ask a question to Juanita and another one to Laura. To Juanita, I'm interested in what you said about the Super Amigos program. I would like to know how much do they pay and what's the proposition that you give them. I mean, what do you give to those people who are paying? And to Laura, I would like to know if it's possible to for you to tell us what are the things that are interested, that people in the media are interested about Homicide Watch. When you talk to these these newspapers in Chicago or San Antonio, what are the doubts that they have about your project, and what are the things that they consider good or difficult? So that's it.
Okay, for the Super Amigos, we got $40,000 that pays 1 month of La Silla Vacia, which, in a way it's a little, but in a way it's a lot because it's 1 month that you don't have to work. And our proposition was support the independent journalism that we do. We chose as the date to launch the campaign the Day of Independence of Colombia. So we said, this is our cry of independence. Supported giving us money, and we had a limit between $10 and $250. And we also asked people to say, what would you have done with that money if you had not given it to us? So it was interesting because people were saying, oh, I would have gone to the cinema, or I would have whatever. So we then published that, and we also gave them like a certificate, just like a fun certificate. We didn't offer anything in exchange in terms of membership or anything like that. But after the campaign closed, it was the first time we did it for 2 weeks, and then we did it for a month. and we had a goal. Our goal was to reach 500 Super Amigos. So there was a counter, and people were like, 2 days before we didn't have enough people, and people really started like in Twitter saying, "Oh, you have to support La Silla Vacia. We have to reach the 500." And then after we finished the campaign, we told people, "Okay, we got that much money. This is what we are planning to do with your money," and we are all the time. Every 2 months we were saying, okay, this was financed with the money from Super Amigos, and we put like a little sign that you are a Super Amigos where you comment. So people, I think what's been more important about this, more than the money, is that it has strengthened the idea of a community. And when we do the debates in the university, we invite them. We just published a book, and we gave them, we told them, since you are our Super Amigos, you'll have the same discount that we as journalists have, things like that.
So the question again was, what are newsrooms afraid of with Homicide Watch? And it's a really terrific question. We've said occasionally that it's easier to get a newsroom to say yes to something than to say no to something. And when they say yes to Homicide Watch, it means saying no to doing their crime coverage the way they've been doing it for a really, really long time. And that's a really hard sell. It also means that the reporters that they've had on the beat look at it and say, as we heard earlier, well, that's just something else that I'm going to have to do, and I'm too busy anyways. They look at it and say, 100% of homicides, from crime to conviction, that's a lot of work. All of our arguments, all of our examples, all of the ways that we show that this is a more effective, more efficient way to work have to break past that no. And that's the hardest thing that we really face. We've been able to do it in a limited number of newsrooms, and they have had incredible success, rivaling that of what we've had in D.C. But that does remain our hardest problem. That's really why I'm focused on the student reporting labs and working with young journalists, because they don't have that fear. They do have that creativity, and they are able to look at things and say, maybe I can try doing this in a different way and see what happens. And that's really where I think we're looking at focusing our efforts as we go forward.
I have time. One more question.
Oh, perfect. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Bailey McGowan here. My question is, when you realized you had this idea, what kind of research did you do to make sure that you were relevant and necessary for your audience?
That's a great question.
Are you the one, by the way? I gotta say, somebody tweeted that they were like they're tweeting and asking a question at the same time. Is that you? That's impressive.
Multitasker.
Yeah, look, I think the thing about running a startup media company is that you have a huge opportunity to experiment. And if you set up the company in the right way, that sort of the content that you publish is always sort of research analysis on your audience, because you don't have an audience at the beginning, and you're growing an audience, and so obviously we've done focus groups, and we've sort of reached out to young people, and everywhere I'm going, I'm asking young people, where do you get your news? What do you want in your news? What do you like about certain news, etc. But I think in a sort of a day-to-day workings out of how this works out, you test lots of different content, and you set it up so you've got both in terms of politics and arts and entertainment and entrepreneurship, different types of content, and then also looking carefully at sort of what's resonating, what's not resonating, and trying to sort of process and understand and come up with theories with which we can then apply next week and say, okay, if we're going to cover Ukraine next week, what can we do instead, and see how that takes off. And so our audience is obviously still growing, and that's how we look at it, as like there's no one right way to tell a story, and experimenting.
Juanita?
Yeah, my advice would be to beware of your friends, because they give you 100 reasons for not to do what you want to do, because there are many reasons why you will fail. So my advice is just listen to Rosenthal, who is always supportive, and go, and just do it.
Go ahead, Laura. I feel like we should end on that note, because Rosenthal's not going to get an ego boost in that, but it's going to keep going for the rest of it.
The one thing that I will add is that I paid a lot of attention to what people were trying to do in the world, what my audience was trying to do before I started. That meant looking at how they were interacting on Twitter, how they were interacting on Facebook, how they were interacting on online obituaries, etc. And then to guide my editorial principles around what they needed from me and what they were exhibiting there. Rosenthal's also an excellent mentor.
Joey, do you want to add, especially since you're so new as a brand?
I mean, there were very, very good comments, of course, but I think just from a business side, I think sooner or later you just have to do it. I mean, 90% of the investors we talked to were always pushing back. They were always giving me reasons why not to do it. And at the end, the most common business question at the end was, okay, if you guys are putting in like $500,000, we'll put in $500,000. But if you guys are putting in nothing, we're not going to follow you. So no matter whether or not you do get investment or support or acknowledgement, I think there has to be that one point where you just close your eyes and you just jump. And that's the only way you'll find out.
And Emily, do you want to end with?
I would just say, look for a niche and look for a hole. I think that's what we did.
Great.
So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our panel.